ba 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 bum 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 ba bum.
You know, as much as I hate the thought of DLC, patches, updates, I'm willing to make an exception this time around. Like, seriously, I think I'm willing to make an exception. Hey folks, BlackCross here, and I figure today we needed to do a discussion video regarding Final Fantasy 15 yet again, but this time I'm actually going to be open-minded about the concept and ideal of future updates for Final Fantasy 15. I really didn't want to talk about something like this, because that just encourages the ideal to make future updates and DLC in other games. To which I still state, in my personal fullest opinion, that I don't want that. However, though, in some cases, I am willing to be open-minded about the ideal concept because of what has transpired throughout the series of Final Fantasy 15. Now, if you remember back when I did my deep thoughts into Final Fantasy 15, which I'll be sure to put it in the description for you guys so you can check that video out real quickly, I stated that the main game itself had a few minor tweaks that I felt like could have done a little bit better, could have made the game a little bit more bigger, more expansive, would have made the story a hell of a lot more interesting, and would have more or less made it like an actual Final Fantasy game, and not so much as the... what's the term I'm looking for? Penny that you found on the ground, and instead upgrades to a quarter that you found on the ground. Not much of an analogy, but close enough. The point is that I didn't want DLCs to be the main focus for Final Fantasy 15. I wanted the main game to be the main focus. I wanted it to be more expansive, and I wanted it to be more interesting. However, though, that's not what 15 is. 15 has made itself into a more expansive series thanks to the anime and thanks to the movie. It made the story that much more of a kickoff to where you're more familiar about everybody else, and you don't have to worry about having like extra padding to the actual game itself. And while that worked, it still missed a couple of margins of opportunity that it had in the main game that could have made it better. But the past two DLCs that we've had, Episode Gladios and Episode Prompto, it's made the game a little bit more interesting. How so? For starters, change of gameplay mechanics I've noticed. In Episode Gladio's case, his gameplay mechanic has changed a little bit more because of the moveset that he's technically known for. He's known for mostly the Buster Sword and the Shield, and that's all he's known for. So to have the ideal concept of Rage as well as an extra button command more or less makes it kind of a unique twist in the Final Fantasy 15 gameplay. And then Episode Prompto, where not so much a first-person shooter type style, which I thought that's what they were going for, it still stayed in its roots of Final Fantasy 15X gameplay, but more strategically with the fact that you're given RPGs, machine guns, and a sniper rifle. Needless to say, I'm willing to be open to the ideal of these DLCs to help kind of fill in some of the gaps that it might have helped in. However, though, in its latest DLC, Episode Prompto, it delved deeper into the origin of the enemy known as the Empire, or in some cases, Niflheim. Now, to kind of go back to the main game itself, when you finally... Hold on. Spoiler alert! There... don't know how I'm going to do that in terms of editing. That's going to be the most editing I'll ever do in my entire life. But regardless. Spoiler alert. Basically, when you finally reawaken from the crystal itself, the whole world is basically entranced in darkness. But you find out that basically the demons that you have been encountering during the nighttime are actually normal people who were basically more or less invested by this disease of some kind, and they more or less transform into monsters. So it kind of goes back to the realm of like how Final Fantasy X had the whole Sphera type deal, where if the souls of the passing didn't go on to the far plane, they would become fiends themselves. Instead, this one became more of a disease type thing, and if nothing's changed, they eventually become grotesque monsters themselves. Again, very fascinated by that ideal transition. But back to episode prompter, you find out that Niflheim has been actually invested with this disease, and basically they're trying to fix it. And they think the ideal sentient is to infuse themselves with demon. How far did that last? Not that long. But the scientist himself basically researched on the ideal and tried to connect the dots, and he eventually kind of come up with the ideal of a transition for himself. I just knocked that can over there. That's not what I wanted to do. So, yeah, in kind of a sense, he kind of fucked everything up even worse. And you kind of find out more about Prompto in a lot more darker tone than I wanted to. Like, I kid you not, I actually thought that Prompto was like, you know, whenever I found out he was part of Niflheim, I was like, okay, so they have this, like, big security crisis type thing, and that's why they have the code on them? Is that why? It's like, as soon as that transition expired in the main game, I was so confused. I was like, I thought I knew Prompto more. Now I don't. But then I found out even more in episode Prompto. It makes a hell of a lot of sense, but at the same time, pretty fucked up. Yeah, my mind is, definitely trying to absorb the concept that just expired into the DLC itself. Again, if you don't know what happened, you might want to play the DLC, because this actually does go into a little bit more detail into the Empire, which is something that everybody actually wanted to see. Like a little bit more in-depth behind the Empire, a little bit more behind the scenes, what motivated them to become what they are today. To kind of see what transpired them, what kind of plot were they planning in the overall concept feel. And in a sense, we've slowly gotten that through the update patch for chapter 13.2, and then with episode Prompto, we've slowly started to get that. But then comes another transition, where I want more out of these patches and DLC that we're getting so far. So, on that topic, I figured I'd try to put together ideal scenarios that maybe Square Enix would be willing to adjust, / put in a later patch, or for the overall concept, improve the game itself. And I'm wanting to talk about this because a couple of months back, there was a post that was made on like, what would you like to see come up for Final Fantasy 15 future updates? And they had like quite a list of things that people wanted to see. And I figured, why not do a video based on this concept and kind of like talk about what we personally want to see. Now, of course, I'm going to be looking at the ideal concept of execution. Not the overall, like, hey, let's have a story portion of Lunafreya. Or hell, how about a story portion with Izura? Or with Irina? In terms of ideals, they're great. Execution-wise, I feel like it wouldn't work. So I figured, instead of all this, let's be realistic about this and come up with an actual scenario that we could actually put together. So the first and foremost thing that I want, because obviously we still have episode Ignis on the way, which won't be until December, we really would like to see a form of chapter prologue type thing for Auden. Now, Again, spoiler warning for you guys. Auden is actually the ancestor of Prince Noctis. He is the first of the ancestor line. He's like the very beginning concept. And what he was trying to do when he was in his prime was very commendable. But because of what happened, he more or less deformed himself into more of a monster than he should have been. Kind of like imagine Jet from Final Fantasy X, where he basically thought of an idea of how to completely destroy Sin once and for all, and he ended up becoming Sin himself in the process of it. Part of his plan, but at the same time, it was more of something else. In Auden's case, this disease was actually infesting his people, and he was trying to purify them. In that process that he did that, he managed to corrupt himself in the process, making him more evil, I suppose you could say. In my personal opinion, it's not so much evil, so much a little bit more messed up in the head. But I would like to see an actual, story chapter portion of Auden. Rather, it's seeing an update patch that you would encounter, say for example, during the time that Noctis was asleep, you get to play as Auden as he basically goes through the entire empire to the center of it all, just to kind of reminisce on what he was or what he did and stuff like that. Because I kind of would like to see a little bit more story in depth behind him, or hell, have it to where years ago what he did and what he had to go through. I would be accepted of that ideal too. Like I said, they could easily do something like this, but they need to execute it to where not only does it work in terms of story, but also in gameplay. Because if it doesn't work on one end, it's not going to work for the other end. Even if the story is good, gameplay needs to be involved, because that's what Final Fantasy 15, the game, is based on gameplay. And while the story is slowly getting enhanced every single time, it still needs to improve on the overall concept. Now, of course, there is a possibility for other stories to come up as well. While we still have the King's Tale that we have on that expectation, I wouldn't mind actually seeing another story portion with King Regis as well. In my personal opinion, I think seeing an extra storyline with him would be pretty interesting, as well as to fight as him would be pretty mind-blowing in my personal opinion. Let's try to go into a realm of ideal where it's back in his younger days, when he was going through the trials of becoming a king himself. Or maybe there might have been some form of transition during the time he was ruling and when Noctis was growing up. Maybe something happened through there. You could do a number of things with King Regis. I love his character. I love how he ended up becoming the most likable character next to Auden. I really enjoy King Regis. He's really enjoyable, and I wanted to know more about his character as he started to become unfolding. And then, of course, as they killed him off in the movie and at the start of the game, I began to feel like Noctis and felt like I was the only person who actually loved him. I was like, no, my favorite character. Oh shit. I'm going down. I can't go any lower than this. The point is, though, having another story portion with King Regis would be an interesting installment in Final Fantasy 15 main game concept. Like I said, I would love to see another story in depth with him. How they would do it, I'll leave it to Square Enix to decide. I just want some form of extra story portion or extra gameplay concept with King Regis. Just me. In all honesty, as much as these so-called time trial quests have been more or less of Square Enix's answer to increasing the game's time concept, there is, however, a flaw behind that concept alone, and that is the term itself, time quest. In other words, it's only going to be there for a limited time, and I personally don't like that ideal, because here's how I'm looking at it this way. I'm a gamer by nature. In other words, I play other games besides Final Fantasy. I play Kingdom Hearts, I play freaking Bloodborne, Dark Souls, I play Devil May Cry, God of War, Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper. I play numerous of other game titles that comes out throughout the year, and I go back to play other games that I have never played before. So naturally my list is always full. So to go back to 15 over and over and over again isn't something that I can always think of right off the bat. In fact, the last couple times that I've seen that Final Fantasy 15 update, it doesn't dawn on me that that's what it is. It is the update for the time quest hunts that they do all the time. So it's kind of like, if you don't get to it on that particular week, you kind of miss out entirely. So I think Square Enix could easily fix that by updating the patch to where you can actually access the time trial quest anytime at any confidential meaning. Basically, it gives you the list of all the quests that have become available. You enter in at least one of those quests, and there you go. You can do it anytime you want to without having to worry about missing it at a second notice. Like I said, for us as gamers, this is actually probably one of the hardest things that we have to do in our normal lives, is being up to date with all the stuff that goes on, let alone being there a time crunch. So, yeah, in my personal opinion, I would like to see that get changed over to where you can actually select any of the quests and not have to worry about missing them out, because I missed every last one of them. And believe me whenever I say this, there was at least one quest that I would love to get into, but I couldn't. Now, in episode Prompto, they discussed about the monster known as Diamond Weapon. And that kind of opened up the Ideal's transition, because I had forgotten about the Diamond Weapon. You actually get to see it in Kingsglaive. Now, the only thing is, we never encountered it in the entire game. And so they brought it up in episode Prompto, which makes me wonder if they're not thinking about bringing him back as like a secret boss that you can actually encounter in the game. Because technically you fight the ultimate weapon, or ultimate weapon I suppose they call it, but it wasn't as interesting so much, it was just intense. That's all it was. It was just an intense boss fight. But even though that wasn't the case, I would actually like to fight Diamond Weapon. Honestly, as big as he is, I don't know how Square Enix will encounter that. But I would love to see a scenario to where you actually fight against the Diamond Weapon. Either as a secret boss of some kind, or as a quest boss, I don't know. I just want it. I really want to fight Diamond Weapon now. And hell, considering the fact that this is the Empire we're talking about, maybe they've created other weapons. So, kind of going back to the ideal of Final Fantasy VII, we fight back Emerald Weapon, we can fight back Ruby Weapon, Sapphire Weapon even? I mean, come on already. I'm giving you options, I'm giving you ideals. Use them, I'm giving them to you for free. If you're willing to pay me for them, I'll take it, but I'm giving to you for free, Square Enix, okay? Take these ideals and make 15 a little bit better by adding these secret bosses. I'm just giving you ideals, you know. Try not to make them generic, just give them unique looks. Okay? Okay, we're good. We're good. I'm glad I got that out of my chest. Another thing that I really would like to see is like an ideal concept of actually upgrading all weapons and not just certain ones. Because the DLC weapons themselves are only good for like the first hour. I kid you not when I say that. Within the first hour, they're only good for that amount of time. They're not that good afterwards. So in other words, the DLC weapons themselves become kind of useless. You know, Masamune, you got the mage daggers, you've got the spear that is introduced in Final Fantasy XIV. I mean, like I said, these weapons are cool and awesome, but the problem is they become useless after the first hour because they don't level up. You can't upgrade them. So have it to where they can be upgraded, you know? Rather they be like a list of items that you have to acquire to give to Cid, because just attaining one item to upgrade that weapon seems a little easy for me. Give me a list agenda of what items is needed, like 5 at best, 5 random items at best that needs to be upgraded for that weapon. I personally would like to see that. Also, too, make it to where, like, these particular weapons, once they get upgraded, they actually get a dramatic boost for one time. Being that, you know, they're a little bit more surpassive than, like, the Ultimate Blade. Because, trust me whenever I say this, the Ultimate Blade is not the best weapon in the game. Despite what you do, it is not the best weapon in the game. Which kind of sucks, because I was expecting more out of it. Because once I finally did get the item needed to make it the Ultimate Blade, it wasn't that great. It's kind of sad, really. I expected more out of it. I guess my expectations are a little bit high now that I think about it these days. Now here's the thing. Now while I normally don't mind riding my car or going through the air with the regalia or changing into a giant monster truck, I kid you not, that's what Square Enix did with this latest DLC. It transformed into a freaking monster truck. I think we could improve mobile ability just a little bit better. How so? Let's give it a little bit an ideal concept. In other words, have it to where we can at least ride bikes. That's stupid, I know. But I wouldn't mind bikes. I mean, that's just a small little critique that I would like to see. But at least have it to where all 4 of the characters ride a bike. That'd be freaking cool. Like I said, that's a stupid concept, but I actually wouldn't mind that. I mean, hell, if we can make the regalia into a giant monster truck, I think we can accept the idea of a bike. A motorbike, you know? I mean, come on. I'm giving you options here. Come on. Let's keep rolling. Also, too, let's get an ideal for the chocobo races, because, quite frankly, those chocobo races aren't really much. Like, they're not really existing at all. So instead, how about an ideal of where we can have these chocobos actually be an actual race event? Over in Altissia, for example. I mean, Alticia's got a lot of stuff that you can technically do, so why not implement the ideal of a chocobo race track? You know, where you actually have, like, interchangeable races and stuff, and you fight other racers as well. You actually get to, like, invest in your chocobo a little bit. You actually get to help it boost stats and stuff. So, I mean, and give the reward system a little bit more reward for us as gamers who wants to be invested in something, you know? Give us an interesting reward that we want to get into. And while we're back in the idea of Altissia, how about we up the ante up, shall we? Remember that arena that we can actually go into and bet on monsters and stuff? Let's change that ideal, shall we? I mean, we can keep that if you want to. But let's have it we can fight random seed monster generator areas. That sounds insane, but I think some gamers like myself would actually like the idea of entering a Coliseum at any random time and it have randomly generated enemies that you actually have to fight. As crazy as that sounds, I think some gamers would be pleased with that ideal. I personally myself would be definitely pleased, because some of the dungeons in Final Fantasy 15 can be challenging because of the monster setup. This is no different. We can actually have that set up to where the room is darkened to where we fight these random encountered monsters. Another ideal, where you can rearrange monsters that you get to fight on your own, whether they be normal fiends or actual monsters. Change it up to where you can actually fight boss monsters as well. I mean, come on already, you know? There is such thing as random seeds. So, make that a possibility in 15, because, like I said, I love the combat in 15, and I have nothing against the combat. I felt like, though, the game wasn't as best as it could have been. So, if these updates are what you're wanting to do, then let's get creative with these ideals and create a seed monster round type thing. I don't know, I'm just giving you ideals right now. And while we're at it, I do want to add one more small little detail in terms of updates. The final part of Final Fantasy 15, I think we could easily extend it a little bit longer. How so? How about before the campsite itself, Noctis and crew actually have to walk towards the campsite first. As crazy as that sounds, hear me out. I actually would like that idea because it gives you a sense of scarcity and importancy that you need to get to the area to keep yourself safe. And trust me whenever I say this, at this point in the game, you may be high enough level to where you can take them out anyway. Plus, you've got the summons, so why not use them, you know? They're there for a reason. Give them purpose. And then, once you actually get into the kingdom itself, let's make it to where the area becomes a little bit more longer in order to fight these intense battles. I mean, the area itself wasn't long enough for me, I feel like. I felt like it was so immersively there that you got to the castle right off the bat, the actual building itself. Or, if you want to do a little differently, have it to where you actually have to scale up the building itself. Multiple games have done this to where you actually have to scale up the building by either elevator or floor-wise, stairways, or whatever. I just wanted to be a little bit longer because I felt like the final area wasn't really that big. I wanted to be like an amazing showdown, and instead it was more or less of like, okay, we're here, and we're there. Again, I'm not complaining, I'm just saying I wanted more out of it. And then of course, let's have another ideal assumption and change up the final battle. Again, this is major spoilers, but when you're fighting Alden, have him have like a second phase where he actually transforms into a monster. I want to see an actual super boss mode monster of Alden. I mean, he's already corrupted. Technically, he should have the ability to transform into a monster, I suppose. Because every Final Fantasy game, you've always fight a big version of that boss, or some kind, a big version. So why not give us a bigger version of Alden? Give him like a little bit more of a demented version. Give him something, I don't know. Like I said, I just want the final battle to be more epic instead of short. There's a joke in there, and I'm not going to use it. I'll leave that for you guys to decide. But anyway, though, I just want to go ahead and talk a little bit about future DLC, future updates, future patches for Final Fantasy 15. Like I said, 15 isn't bad, by no means, no, and I've started to kind of accept the idea that these patches are actually helping the game a little bit at a time. But I want these patches to be used in areas that could be useful in order to make the game more expansive, make it more bigger, and make it enjoyable. Because the game itself is enjoyable, but I think it could be even more so depending on certain conditions. I think anyway. But anyway, that's just me. That's what I was just thinking. Anyway, though, I'll see you in the next video. This is BlackCross signing off, and let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the future DLC and patches for 15. Would you like some? Would you be willing to accept these ideals? And what type of changes would you like them to do? Because the more this gets talked about, the more likely 15 can get better. So anyway, though, I'll see you in the next video. This is BlackCross signing off. Take care, guys.